Fans of Warhammer 40,000, the squats of the Ironhead, and civilian vehicles in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, thank you very much for joining me for a model and build review. And today I have something unusual, interesting, and relatively new for you. And it is this model here, the Ironhead Squat Prospector's Skalvian Explorator. Gosh, try saying that after a few jars. This is a full resin model kit from Forge World, and it was released in December 2023 and is the second vehicle that Forge World has done as part of the current Necromunda game miniatures range. And what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to take a look at this model, and it is a very interesting, unique and unusual design. Even by Forge World standards, I think it's safe to say this is quite unlike anything that has come before or since. It's this large tracked vehicle with an almost like submersible crew compartment, but a load of other things going on with it as well. So it's an absolutely fascinating model. And what I am going to talk about today is a few things. So I'm going to show you around the model. We're going to take a look at its details and its features. I'm then going to talk about the build experience and then muse a little bit on design influences for this fascinating full resin kit. So that's a plan. Let us begin then with a look around the model. Initial thoughts. Well, yeah, I mean, where do you begin with this? So obviously it's a tracked vehicle. It's a large tracked vehicle. This is about the size of a Land Raider Spartan. Size comparisons coming later, obviously. But it has a number of, well, very unusual design characteristics. So the thing that jumps out immediately is the main crew compartment, or the driver's cabin, we could say. And it has this circular porthole, and this is highly reminiscent of a submersible. So not a submarine, but a submersible. So a submersible being a deep sea exploration vessel. I'll put an example of a photo of one on screen now. So Alvin 1 would be one. And this manipulator arm as well is also quite in line with a remote exploration vehicle. But it's more than that, because it's tracked vehicles. It has a weapons turret on top, which this is equipped with a twin heavy stubber. There's another weapon on the manipulator armor, which is a heavy flamer. We've got a crew deck, so both in terms of actual models and in game, you can place crew on these gantries. There's an engine here. We'll have a look at that in more detail. These, which I actually think are cylinder heads, or something equivalent, and one of the great things that we're going to find out in this video, that in the grim darkness of the far future, V6 engines still exist. A pair of exhausts, an access ladder for scaling the side, but then there's some much more unusual characteristics of this vehicle. The main one is the base configuration, and we have the two track units and then the supporting structure, and these are supposed to be like sprung suspension arms here, so it's like crossing rough terrain, I imagine. This puts me in mind of almost like a port, like a cargo shifting frame. I don't know what the correct name is, but a cargo crane, which move shipping containers around and they can drive around a bit. They would sling the weight in the center line. It reminds me of that a bit. And then, of course, the other thing we can see a bit from the back here, and this is a cargo that the Skalvian is carrying. And this is a chemical refining complex, or perhaps a chemical transportation reactor. So this is a cargo hauler as well as an exploration vehicle. And perhaps part of why it explores is to find chems out in the ash wastes and other nether zones of Necromunda to retrieve them. And I think the driver's cabin, being this enclosed environmental pod, leans nicely into this idea. I think of this being a vehicle to explore semi-hostile environments, or certainly toxic environments. So this really is an unusual vehicle, and I've never seen anything quite like it, as I said earlier. Really, really interesting. So let's have a look at some more details close up. So the track units, there's a set of bogies, return wheelers on the top, and then we've got a sprocket and an idler wheel, or maybe the other way around. I'm not sure which is supposed to be the drive. I think this is actually supposed to be the drive here, because we've got these here, these arms. I think these are supposed to be power transmission of some sort, because these actually link back to the power pack there. This badge here, I think this is the Squat Prospectors badge, or the Ironhead Prospectors badge. As you can see, as we all expect from Forge World models, this is a beautifully detailed kit. Everything is fully detailed. from every direction. It feels quite a solid vehicle, but it's also quite an open design. If we look underneath, which is, surprise, surprise, fully detailed, we can see these bits in a bit more detail. I'd say I think these are the power transmission feeds. I'm not entirely sure how that's working. I imagine it's an electromechanical drive. We'll come back to that in a bit. And then we can see the underside of the reactor, chemical transportation complex or reactor. And there's a better look at the crew cabin. And we can see on the underside there is an access port. So it's perhaps not as protected against the environment as, say, crew sphere of a deep sea submersible, but it still gives that impression. And of course, this is a far future universe vehicle, so who knows what technological advancements might have occurred. One of the great things with this vehicle was opportunities to magnetize. As you probably already noticed, this arm is moving around, and the manipulator arm is a great way to magnetize. And I put a magnet in here and a magnet in here. I think there's a 6x3 N35 grade neodymium magnets. You don't need to do that. However, given this is quite fragile, I mean, it's not super fragile, but it's quite fragile. And given it sticks out a bit, I think magnetizing it is a great way of protecting it against being snapped off and damaged. And there you can see the heavy flame of the manipulator claw and the feed pipes, so the fuel lines, as the fuel tank for the flamer. And those fuel lines run in. Very nice. In terms of magnetized items, well, we also have the defense turret, defense weapon turret. We have some nice details here. We have the twin heavy stubber as well. I think this is called the Ironhead heavy stubber. I don't know how the rules work for it in game. And then we also have this here, which is presumably a very powerful spotlight with a pair of power cables or some sort of cable running into it, but perhaps it could be a radar as well. Who knows? And then a couple of sensors in a few different points. So that's a nice feature as well. Again, don't have to magnetize it, but it is a nice little feature to do so. Those are the two obvious things to magnetize on this model. However, me being me, I saw the opportunity to do a third, and that was in the form of the reactor. And anyone who watches me over on Instagram will already know this, because if I give this a gentle tug, we have removed the reactor complex from the Skalvian. Now this is wonderfully designed. There's a lot going on here. So we've got a whole selection of cylinders, containers, tubes, things, something here that looks not dissimilar to a RTG, a radioisotope thermocouple generator. That's a sort of power source that has been the go-to choice for deep space exploration probes in real world. So the Voyager probes and the New Horizon probes, the Curiosity and Perseverance landers that have been sent to Mars, all powered by RTGs. So perhaps that's one of those as well. So yeah, some amazing detailing here. And what I did was, if a light will be kind to us, and I think you can probably see those shiny magnets in there. I put some 3x2mm N52 magnets in here, and then also married those up with the mounting brackets here. Now you definitely don't need to do that, but again, I thought adds an interesting function to the kit. It will help with the painter for accessibility. It allows you to see all the wonderful detail that lives in here, and we'll come to that in a moment. And also in game, you could then have scenarios where you have to, say, move and pick up the reactor, or perhaps you've got to drop it somewhere and then drive somewhere. So it adds a little bit more, I don't know, game functionality as well, I feel, to this piece. So yeah, I really like that. And it's nice that it was designed in such a way to allow that. If you look in here, you can see some really, really good details. So these are the mounting umbilicals, and there are a set of universal joints that articulate those. So I feel it's sort of like rocks. I don't actually feel that the chemicals are connected to the unit. It's just like a mounting point. And then we can see here the exhausts from the power pack. Now, I said this is a V6, and I'm just saying that purely because there's 6 exhaust manifold pipes, 3 on each side, 2 banks of 3, running into these long exhausts that then appear at the back. And then we've got those nice holes there. and these are the cylinder heads. Now, who knows if it is a typical combustion piston engine as we understand it today. Perhaps it's somewhat different in its operation, but I kind of like to think in grim darkness of a far future, this is powered by very efficient, high-powered V6 unit. And then what I feel it's doing is it's transmitting power down this tunnel to here, the transmission block, and then power is feeding into the track units here and here, and then driving this, and it's basically like an electromagnetic drive. So this is where you've got an engine driving a generator. So there isn't a direct physical transmission connection transmitting the power, so no cogs and shafts. It's done via an electrical system, and that is technology that is used in a whole host of applications today in the real world. There's loads of examples, and everyone who can think of one, and the more unusual the better, in the comment section can have a kudos point. So yeah, that is a look around the model. Very, very interesting model, and it's great to see Forge World doing something new and unusual with the models. And as when I unboxed this, I commented on that. You know, we've got a very mature, complete Heresy tank range now, covering several factions. So Solar Auxilia, the Legions, Astartes, and the Mechanicum. Now they're saying, right, what else can we turn our hand to? And they come to Necromunda, and we've got another one of these fascinating designs that would only ever see the light of day as a low production model. So yeah, there you go, that is a Skalvian. So let's just leave it dismantled and move on to talking about the build process. So what was this kit like to build? As I've said before, this is a full resin kit from Forge World. As is always the case with big resin kits, be ready to deal with air bubbles, the occasional mold slip, and fixing some minor imperfections in casting. I mean, the casting quality on this was really good. The kit design is actually surprisingly good. I was surprised how well thought through the kit design was. Whoever did that, well done. And also be ready for dealing with the idiosyncrasies of putting resin kits together. But as a full resin kit, it was okay. Right, what do I think about the build experience? Well, firstly, sequencing. So if we introduce our friend the instructions, I just want to touch on a couple of key points here in terms of sequence. Right, so as is often the case with Forge World instructions, they show you where all the parts go, just not necessarily the best order in which to assemble them. And it starts off by saying put the engine onto the crew cabin and the crew decks and the exhaust, and then build up the rear and get to there. Don't do that. What I did, and the reason not to do that, is you may have some slight misalignment between these two bits and this bit at the back here, this bit here. And if this is misaligned at the back, it's very difficult to hide that. However, if you've got some misalignments at the front, it's much easier to hide that against a join to the cabin. So what I did was I took these two and this piece here and the back piece, and I assembled all those first. I put a pin in the engine. I then mounted the engine to these as well. So I then had a section which was essentially this part here was independent of this. And I used all the way that the model is designed to line up at the back, because there's a very specific fit, and the fit at the back was good. I used that as my starting point, and then I built that together, worked out any warps in the resin pieces, because there was some warping. There was warping in this piece, or warping in these sides, a little bit of warping in this, and then just getting a snug fit on the engine. The engine fits onto these two side pieces really nice. It's got a groove it slides into on each side, and that's a really good fit. So I built all that, I stuck it together. And then I put a pin from here into here to act as a strong location and guiding port. And then I worked on getting the fit right here. I did some heat bending to get this to fit well. I trimmed it some little bits away, a little bit here, a little bit there, just to get it fitting snugly. It took a bit of work to do, but it went together surprisingly well. What I would generally say about that part of the build, and this is true of the whole model, is this is a complicated vehicle. If you look at its geometry, you know, this is not a simple looking vehicle. If you compare this to, say, that Cerberus that's hiding over there for the size comparison, Cerberus, it's like big chunky tracks, a hull. This thing, you got your tracks, you got your suspension units, and you got a complicated hull. So it is a complex design. So expect some challenges with the build just by the kit complexity. But it went together well overall. Surprisingly well, actually. Certainly the hull bit. When it came to the tracks, I did have an issue with the tracks. And that was that the tracks were too long for the runner. And if we can get some light, and you can see that evidenced here. You can see there's a plasticard spacer in there. And you can also see at the back, there's a plasticard spacer there and another plasticard spacer there. And basically my solution was I couldn't figure out a way to shorten the tracks because the tracks fit together really well on the outer. All the track units are of a consistent size. So what I did was I just extended this front bit out a bit with a little spacer on the top and bottom of the joining point. There's that bit there. And then at the back, I had to saw this piece off here and then put the spacer in. So that was a more drastic alteration. And, you know, think about your modelling skills and your confidence before undertaking something like that. But it worked for me. You could probably get away with that more at the back by not doing such a drastic change than at the front. But I think at the front, it really needed that space. Now, are all of these the same? No, I don't think they are. I've seen a few photos that people have also built this on social media, and at least 2 people showed photos with the same issue on the track fit or said they had had a similar issue. But I saw at least one example where the fit was fine. So it might be a bit of pot luck there as to whether or not you get one where the tracks fit fully. But certainly in my instance, I did have that oversized track compared to the bogey unit to contend with. But that, I think, was probably the main fit issue on the whole kit. You can't see it so much now it's assembled, but let me show you. This bit here, where the decks meet, here, where the decks meet the front, there's a big gap there, so I filled it in with putty and cut it to shape. So that's how I dealt with that little bit there. I also cut one of these down a bit so it lined up properly with the shape of the meeting, with the part interfaces on here. So that was another thing I needed to do some work on to get a good fit with. As you can probably imagine, the suspension arms were quite difficult to do. Again, there's nothing wrong with the fit of the kit, it's just a complicated geometry. The way I worked on doing that is I did the front 2 first, well, I did one at a time. I got the whole thing ready to dry fit, and then I got the fit good on this one and stuck it, and then I worked out the fit on this one and stuck it, and then I did the back ones as well and stuck those. Now before I did that though, I did something else. For this I just need to remove some pieces, so bear with me while I wrestle this. So there's a pin in there for strength and also for guiding, and as you can see here, the track comes off. What I did was I put pins in, and they're angled pins. Yeah, and those pins locate into the mounting points, and that's to hold it in position. And I really needed that to help me with lining it up. And it was only through those that I could get it to hold together dry, so I could then get these lined up properly. So I did those front ones first, then I did the back ones, did the uppers first, then secondly, and I've not stuck these yet either. Oops, that was slightly vigorous. I put pins in there and there, again to help with the lining up. The reason I've not stuck those yet is for this video, just to show you. In the process of doing this, I needed to heat bend some of these lower arms a bit, just to get it all to line up. And again, I tackled them one at a time, and starting at the front and working back, worked out any warps and misalignments. And ultimately, as you can see, assuming it won't fall apart now, I got it nice and lined up and everything true. And there's a couple of things you're working at here. You need to make sure that these are level, because I found out the box, they had a bit of tendency to bend inwards like this. So I worked that out. And then the other thing is, from a top perspective, is getting it all lined up with the decking, which that's not showing you the best there, so it's sort of falling apart a bit. We're dealing with a bit of barrel distortion on the camera, but trust me, they are nice and square. But by bending these bits here and getting the arms right, you can make sure that the spacing between the tracks and the decking is square front to back, and also consistent on each side, so it looks like it's not being thrown together by Bodget and Scarpa Squat Industries. So let me think, any other issues with the build? For such a complex looking model, it did go together well. Not easy. It's a challenging kit, and definitely not for a beginner, I would say, unless you're very, very brave. There's some nice little bits where you could enhance the detail, you know, entirely planned that track unit falling off. You can see here how you've got the exhaust pipes There were undercut supports though, which are necessary to cast it. I cut them all away so the tubes look as they were supposed to, just to enhance the detail. So that was a nice little touch. I also spent an evening cutting away all the under supports on these air supply hoses or power supply hoses for the crew cabin, which you can see honest. There you go. Just to enhance detail a bit. You don't need to do that. There are opportunities there if you are interested in testing out your modelling skills and enhancing the look of the model a bit. Other things, I drilled out these exhausts to make them look bigger. They do come pre-sunk. I just thought it didn't look deep enough, and I thought, well, it's just a cylinder, isn't it? So I drilled it out. Just make it look a bit more like an exhaust, I suppose. I think that's probably about it. Minor details, those fit nicely. All the little towing hooks and the grab handles on the crew door fit nicely, as did these two flow pipes. These all fit surprisingly true. For those, I put a tiny little pin. I drilled it very carefully through the length of it. And that was just because I was doing this conversion, that was to make sure that they wouldn't snap. And then when I mounted them, there isn't really room for a pin there, so I scored with a spike. I scored the attachment point on the two parts, and then used some very thin super glue to mount them, and then nice and strong. Same size magnets on those on the inside. It's 3x2mm neodymium N52s, and that holds that really well. If you're doing that, obviously when you're gluing and fitting, make sure you test fit. Do them one at a time. Glue them in place one at a time. Make sure you get it nice and true. Right, let's try put this together again. Very delicate little ladder. The rungs are filled in with shims, so you have to cut those out if you want it to look like that. So careful bit of work to do there. Obviously not stuck on yet because of tracks. The tracks, the reason I'm keeping them off as well for the video is to aid with the painting, because it's going to be really difficult to paint inside of there and get all the details. So yeah, partial assembly, I think a wise move on this one. Let's put the reactor back. I gotta admit, this kit, it was worth doing just for this reactor. It is so satisfying to mount and take out. I could do that all day long. Just so fun and so satisfying, that fit. So overall the build, as I say, yeah, it's a complicated kit, complicated design. Any complicated design is going to be a fiddly kit, and it's resin as well. So I wouldn't recommend it to someone who doesn't have a good amount of experience. But that said, while it was difficult, I did enjoy it. Fundamentally, it went together well. I find the end thing a really rewarding model to have built, and it looks absolutely fantastic. I love it. This is something I'd recommend to someone who is looking for a challenging model to build with an exciting and unusual subject. And I don't just say that lightly, because last year I built this thing, the Cronus Ironcrawler, another very cool looking Necromunda vehicle from Forge World. This thing was an absolute nightmare to build. It's like a mini Mark 1 Thunderhawk. It's a kit that fights you every single step of the way. So that is hard, and the kit is not great either. So that is what I'm saying when I say this is a good thing if you're looking for a challenging model and you've got the right skills. With this, you're getting something that is really going to test your sanity to do. Design influences, well, I touched on a bit before. Right, so a couple now. Firstly, submersibles, deep sea submersibles. I think that played a big role in this. It almost looks like the diving helmet on a really old-fashioned diving suit. That's another thing that it put me in mind of. The design was a couple of things. There's like that cargo crane from a dock that I said, in terms of sort of like frame design, going like that. There are also some designs for exploration vehicles for Mars and the Moon, which look a bit like this as well. And I will try to find a photo of one of those. So I wonder if a designer may have also thought about things like that. The tracks look like this is quite World War II with these paired bogies, so like a Sherman tank. I just forget which of the versions, because there was a couple of suspension designs. I can't remember if this was the original or the later development, but it does remind me of that with the paired bogies. It also looks really industrial as well, these big sort of ridged treads, so like an excavator. Post-production leakages here. I also noticed that the tracks on the Skalvian look a lot like those of a Saint-Chamond tank of the World War I French army. So another little one there for you. But these are just influences, and at the end of the day, you've got a very original concept for a vehicle. Something that's quite unlike anything I've ever seen done before. Great respect to the designer or designers and people who are involved in producing this kit, because I think it's fantastic and I've really enjoyed it. Gosh, so that's a lot of talking about the model and its design influences. Let's do some size comparisons. Cheeky Cerberus, come over here. Doing a size comparison against this. When this came out and I'd made some initial comments about it on social media, the question that everyone was asking is, how big is it? I thought it was going to be pretty big. I didn't realize just how big it was. I think the best common comparator of its size is a Space Marine Legion vehicle on the Spartan chassis, and today we have a Cerberus doing that for us. And width-wise and length-wise, the two are very similar. Track to track, the Skalvian is about a centimetre longer than the Spartan vehicle, and then with the arm it's probably about a centimetre longer, even beyond the end of the barrels of the enormous neutron laser array. And width-wise, yeah, pretty much the same. This is maybe a bit bulkier in certain areas. I mean, this has got the sponsors, but yeah, they're more or less the same width. So it's big. It's a big vehicle, the size of a Space Marine Spartan type vehicle. So that's one comparison. Let's do another. So as I mentioned a few moments before, so the year before last, 2022, Forge World released this, the Cronus pattern iron crawler. So this is a hybrid resin plastic kit based on the Cargo 8 plastic wheeled vehicle kit from Games Workshop for Necromunda. Fantastic model. It looks amazing. Cool design and clever use of an existing plastic kit. But I might make a video on this one day if I ever get the mental fortitude to do so, because building it was not a nice experience. It was very, very difficult. But that aside, it also serves as an interesting size comparison against the Skalvian. Now, the Skalvian is a bit wider, not a lot, but a little bit, if only by virtue of these arms. Track width is about the same. Height is almost the same. Skalvian a little bit taller on the base of the turret, a Cronus ultimately taller on account of its aerial. And lengthwise, end to end, the two vehicles, if we go track end, front hull protuberance, the Skalvian is a soupçon longer. However, if you count the winch rope on the Cronus, it's a little bit longer. However, the manipulator arm on the Skalvian is longer still. But more or less, they are comparable. I think the Skalvian feels bulkier because of the way it's set out, but it's also got a lot of air in the centre space. So there's an interesting comparison against another cool Necromunda design, even if the kit's not cool. Right, I'm going to put that away before I start bemoaning it. I suppose you should probably have a quick look at a couple of infantry figures. So I don't have any squats, but I do have some Space Marines. So here we have a word bearer, and this word bearer is at the Battle of Isfahan 5 in the colours of the original Legion, the granite grey. However, they're equipped with a canvas pattern backpack, perhaps a silhouette of things to come. Yeah, that gives you an idea. It's a big old vehicle, isn't it? Obviously, this is a Mark IV from the Calv set, so the current Mark VIs are just a little bit taller. If we take this guy, points for guessing where his head came from. He's more or less, obviously, yeah, there's not much in it, those two. That's how I compare size-wise. And just one more quick one. Very beautiful Terminator. Again, another one of my word bearers. Both these models were painted for me by Nicole Voigt. Very talented painter. She did a great job on those. And there you are, a Terminator next to a Skalvian. So yeah, a big vehicle. But these models can, maybe not so much Terminators, but certainly infantry on 32mm bases can nicely stand on those decks. And I think that's part of how it's supposed to work in game. Very cool. And 25mm bases will fit there perfectly. I don't have any modern Necromunda miniatures, so I don't know how big they are, whether or not we're on 25s. Anyway, so there you go. That was a longer video than I was intending. There's a lot to talk about in terms of the build. There was a lot that I wanted to get into with you about the build process. There's many little quirks and features of this complicated looking vehicle. So overall, in summary, well, as I said, I think it's a great model. Very innovative, imaginative design. I think it looks cool. It's a great piece if you want a challenging and unusual model unlike anything else that's ever been released to build. If you're a squat player in Necromunda, maybe it's a good thing to have you in your army. I don't know. You can use this in many other 40k projects, I imagine, and I bet someone is going to turn one into a Mechanicum macro-carried Explorator. It would certainly fit that bill. But yeah, just beware on the difficulty of a kit like this. You know, it's not easy. You know, you want some previous experience of building large Forge World vehicles, I would say, or other equivalent resin models. But overall, I really enjoyed building it, and I'm absolutely delighted with the end result. And of course, that reactor, which is such a cool little feature to magnetize. Anyway, so there you have it. The Ironhead Squat Prospector Skalvian Explorator from Forge World. I hope you found this a useful and informative review of building this model and its features. As always, please do share your thoughts and observations in the comments section. I'll be interested to hear those, particularly if you've bought one of these and had a go at it. Did you buy the Cronus Ironcrawler and lose sanity points over it like I did? Also interested to hear. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.